So the next thing is to make a round backing plate for the disc, and I've come across this plywood which seems to be quite good quality plywood, so hopefully it will stand the hammering. It's far thicker than it needs to be. I only need it to be about 1/2 inch thick in truth, but I've come across this just so I'll try and use it and see what happens. So using the ruler and the dividers, I'm working out half of this diameter, if you like, such that when I've cut this wood it will be sort of half into this face here, oversized, maybe even slightly larger than that, but at least then I will turn it down in the lathe to the same diameter as the disc that I've just made. I can't find my compass at the moment, so I guess the dividers will do just as well, really. So I'll just scribe a circle round here. And then I'll go ahead and cut that out with the jigsaw. So I've got the plywood laying down. I've gone round the indent that the scriber's made with a pen to make it a little more discernible. So let's have a go at cutting it out. The wood is raised up off the ground on a block. I've got a brush to clean off the dust. So I'll just continue now to cut that round with the jigsaw, and we'll catch up with you later. So I've managed to cut this disc out, and I've managed to get quite close to the lines, so I don't think I need to chase it round with the bandsaw. Let's see if it fits. So I guess that's just about right. So what I'll do now, using this centre point here that the divider's made, I'll saw a hole such that the item that's in the lathe can go through the hole. So I've just got the disc sat on 2 blocks of wood such that the space below it for the cutter. Clamp it down. There we go. One hole. I'll just clean some of this swarf off with a 1/2 round file. So my next task now then is to fit this oversized wooden disc to the rear face of this steel disc, so it's across to the pillar drill. Once I've removed this disc from here, then I'll have to try and set it up again later correctly with the DTI on the edge of this disc to get it to run truly. So my next job now is to attach this oversized wooden disc to the back face of this metal adapter that we've been making previously, this former, and that will be just drilled and screwed from the front and countersunk so these heads disappear, and it will be that kind of arrangement into the wood. And then we'll be able to fasten this back into the 3-jaw chuck of the lathe with this spigot here that's sticking out, and we've got it numbered up still from when it was previously in the 3 jaws. So hopefully we should be able to get this running fairly true. So I'll just centre pop for some drilling holes. Doesn't have to be accurate. And then I'll get them drilled. So I'm just going to start off with a pilot drill that will go into the wood later and aid the screws going into the wood. So I'll drill 4 of those holes to start with. Then I'll transfer one of these holes into this wooden block. Then I'll countersink this steel plate and then re-drill the steel plate with a larger size drill that will be clearance for the screw I'm going to use. So I'm going to countersink this now with a normal drill bit, and the guide for the depth on this drill is set such that hopefully I won't get dragged through the hole, which is why I've only drilled the pilot hole in the first instance and not the clearance hole, such that this doesn't get dragged through the hole inadvertently. So now I've got a countersink for the screw head to disappear into. So I've countersunk all 4 of these holes now, and my next job is to drill a clearance hole through this first hole that I drilled, which will be clearance for the screw to go through. Then I can attach this plate to the wooden block, and then I can pinpoint through with the small drill the remaining 3 holes into the wooden block. Then I can remove this and drill each of the further 3 clearance for the screw, and then the block can be fastened to that completely. So I'll drill the first clearance hole in the first countersunk hole Each of these holes has been given a number with a marker pen, so I can't get them confused. So the screws are nice fit now inside the steel plate. It's below the surface. So I'll secure this steel plate to the wood, and then I'll pilot drill through again in the wood for this plate. So now that I've got this first screw in holding the steel plate to the wood block, I've centered the boss around the center of this hole that we previously drilled. And then I'm just going to pilot drill through now for the screws as I did previously with the first one. So now I'll remove the steel plate from the block of wood and drill through the steel plate clearance for the screw itself. So I'll just drill these 3 remaining clearance holes. Then I'll deburr the holes at the back of here, and I can screw this to the block of wood. And I'm just using a somewhat blunted large drill. And then the steel plate can be attached to this wooden block with the 4 screws. Leave the first one loose until I get the remainder just nicely lined up, and then we'll snug them all down together. So then I'll just snug all 4 down together. There you go. Then this can be returned to the lathe now, made to run as true as I can get it, and then I'll machine down this oversized wooden disc to the same diameter as this steel disc. So it's back to the lathe. So I've got the steel disc mounted back in the lathe chuck with its respective numbers on the jaws, etc. And I've got this DTI alongside, as we can see, as best I can get it for the diameter of it. And on rotating these chuck, it is really quite close, and perhaps as near as I'm likely to get it. So I'll have an experiment with lathe tools, etc., with respect to which one will cut this wood down the best, and then I'll come back to you and we'll have a look. So we're now actually at the back side of the work here, so we can see what's happening with this tool. If I spin that, we can see that I'm virtually at the highest point at the moment, and we should run clear when I start this thing up. I've moved this tool as far around as I need to do to machine the full thickness of that off without any of this coming into contact with anything. So now when I turn this on, I should be able to manipulate this tool and we'll see how it takes off this wood. We may have to change tool. So I'll just keep on machining this irregular shape away, but it does seem to be taking it off quite smoothly, to be fair. So it might not be a bad tool for the job. We'll see how we go. So I'm still using this round button tool to work on this plywood, and I think because the plywood is such a good quality plywood, it really is coming up quite well, really. I've got rid of all the uninterrupted cuts, and now I'm down to a round disc. So that's doing quite well. So I'll continue to machine this down now, nearer to the size of the steel plate. I'll just show you a quick look at one cut and then I'll continue off camera. I'm taking about a 10th cut. Yeah, it's machining up nicely. So as we can see, working with wood does make a mess of the lathe. Looks like Henry's got a bit of cleaning up to do later. But we can see quite clearly that we are getting down to size now. So I've got a feeler gauge here, and the feeler gauge is about 3/1000 of an inch thick. And it's just grabbing where it is there, it's just grabbing ever so slightly. So I'm currently about 3/1000 short of touching this steel disc here. So I'll take this in another couple of thou just till it touches that bit, because what I've done, I've rotated the chuck and the work and found that this is the highest spot of it. It's moving ever so slightly like that as it rotates, and this is the nearest high spot. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that as my reference point for reducing the remainder of this. Bring the tool in till it just leaves a witness mark on there, or near enough. So I'm going to try it at that, and if the cutting tool starts to take steel off, then I am right up to it, if not a little bit too near. Let's see where we're at. I'm not touching steel yet, so I'll just bring the tool in till it just starts to touch it. I can hear it just catching up on the metal now. So that was just catching on the high point of the metal. So we should be good at that. That should be the final cut. So now the wood backer will be at the same diameter as the metal disc. So I've just brought the tool away because I don't want to make this metal disc any smaller than it is. But the wood is now the same diameter as the metal disc with its rounded edge for helping to form the copper tube plate. So I'm just going to trim this mess off at the back here now with a knife, and that will be sufficient. So I'm just trimming off the rubber that was on top of this plywood. I'm just trying to do this so you can see it, hence the cutting towards myself. I always tell my children, never cut towards yourself. There we go. So that's good. Might just get that spinning and run the file on it. I'll draw the tool away out of the way. Safety spin. I've got distance here behind here and the front of the jaws. should do. It will only be this part of the item that's being used in any event. All this is just surplus and just the material that I had for the thickness. So I'll only be using up to about there. So that's the smoke box tube plate former finished. Now I need to make another wooden disc slightly smaller than the metal disc. So that's the next project, a smaller wooden disc. So I'm just going to run this fine file over these countersinks here, just to remove any burrs that might be on these countersinks. You might just hear the file scraping on them. It's just catching on it there. I can just feel it catching on the edge. So I don't really want these burrs to make any marks in the copper. So I'm just trying to remove them, and then I'll follow up with a piece of emery cloth. And hopefully there'll be no marks left in the copper when we get round to forming the tube plate. So I'll just do that on each and follow up with a piece of emery paper that will hopefully remove any burrs, and then when we come to forming the copper plate it won't leave any marks on the copper plate, hopefully.